Please do not be so careful. We don't have this room. All right. Do not lean back and get too comfortable with these. You will go, and we live streaming, so y'all will be a YouTube video that goes viral.
Oh, Michael, your phone. Kind of keep it close over here so we get the strongest signal. Oh, you need to have it next to the
Yes.
I mean, I can sure up there.
Okay, thank you. Oh, we're okay.
Let me give you this link too, real quick. Okay.
So we still waiting.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Tell me.
Well, let me see. Title it.
What's it called? Black Gay.
Yeah, Black Gay Men in Power. We will be heard 2018.
We got some passionate people. Looking at you. So we're trying to give a second for one more panelist to make it. They had a flight that was delayed and they were coming in. They said they were here by 6:20, so we're hopeful. But now we'll have to start without them and then we'll have to join the conversation.
Can everybody hear him all right on that?
So we ask that you take this time to put your phones on Do Not Disturb or silent. Now is a wonderful time for you to go get a libation. If you're trying to grab something to drink, we'll be talking for a good long while before we get to community Q&A. And I think Ulysses is at least at a few that you can drink some. Otherwise, we'll get started in one more minute.
Someone have to approve my post?
Oh, Michael. So we shared the link on the Common Narrative Project page, but I guess like it needs to be approved. This needs to be approved. Oh, they'll approve it.
Whenever they approve it, it'll show up as a recording video.
Okay.
They should just have this state.
Anywhere else you want to share it? Any other pages? I guess you want to tell folks. Okay. Or just let people know, like.
Have you started?
Yeah, it's already going. And there are people who are joining. They said they got a crush on you. You're looking real cute. I'm dead serious.
We're gonna be reading live comments.
I mean,
too.
yeah. They are already going in.
Say the lobby this time. We have a little seat here.
So, yeah, it's kind of live somewhere. Is it?
Yeah.
Oh, you want to go the other way? Other way. Yeah.
Oh, no, that's the
Oh, okay. Oh, well, all right.
You don't understand. All right. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. I am L. Michael Gibson, your moderator tonight and founder of the Black Bear Brotherhood of Detroit, a social collective for Black gay men of size and their admirers and allies. BBB would like to open by thanking our co-host, Onyx Great Lakes. Go ahead and give a round of applause for Onyx Great Lakes. We're on the building.
I'm not totally sure.
Our host home for this event, Affirmations, for allowing us to have our event in this wonderful space this evening, and our co-sponsor for this bipartisan, there will be no campaigning from this stage event, co-sponsor the Counter Narrative Project, a national organization dedicated to and for Black gay men. Thank you, Counter Narrative, for helping make the night happen. For those who don't know, there are 4 other events that are happening today, courtesy of Counter Narrative, some simultaneously around the country in honor of Black gay men's National Day of Action. Detroit is proud to be one among those selected for sponsorship this evening. This evening is also important to the Black Bear Brotherhood of Detroit because it represents our first community-wide event open to the entire greater community. And I just got word that we'll probably be doing a Tongues Untied one in February. So we all look out for that. That will be commemorating the 30th anniversary of that documentary film. It is our hope this is just a start of many more events that we'll be bringing to you. Our biddles for tonight have been brought to you courtesy of Ulysses Jones of Taylor One Gourmet, because BBB supports Black businesses, and they support us back by working within our very limited budgets. Thank you, Ulysses. I'd further like to thank our esteemed panel of tastemakers, influencers, social change agents, artists, politicians, activists, and advocates. We'll have each of them introduce themselves, and in the interest of time, won't read their brilliant bios, because when y'all not, it's all 7 of them. It's a lot of bios. As it is my hope to hurry up and get this conversation started so that folks can get home in time for the season premieres of Shondaland this evening.
Come on.
We got to keep our talented sister, Viola, employed, y'all. Lastly, I'd like to thank each and every one of you for taking the time to come and support this event and engage in this critical topic this evening, be it in the room or over Facebook Live. When commenting on social media tonight about this event, as we go, we ask that everyone please use the hashtag We Will Be Heard. Let's begin. So can each one of you, starting from Al, introduce yourselves.
Right to left, right?
Right to left. Yes, and we also make sure that our brothers have their mics.
Good evening.
I'm Al Cunningham. I'm 66, so I guess that makes me the oldest person probably sitting here. And and I'm not gonna. I think I can speak loud enough for everybody to can hear me.
Yes.
You need me to use this for the. So, as you might have noticed from the program, I am listed as for my affiliation with Adobe Detroit. And I'm very proud to be a member of Adobe Detroit. I am not representing the organization per se. I would encourage, and although I know that there are several people who are initiated members of Adobe who are present on the panel and also many in the audience, I would encourage anyone who has the interest in Adobe to check out the website at adobedetroit.org. As for what attracted me to today's topic, it's a pretty deep, heavy topic, and to be quite honest, I was interested primarily to hear what other people think about it, because it's a lot to consider and to process. And so that's definitely one reason. And the second reason, and only to lie, is that I do have some ideas about these things. I've been thinking about it for a while. I'm sort of a late bloomer. I didn't come out till I was 24. But back in when that happened, it was a pretty big deal. It was actually the bicentennial year, 1976. So the third reason why I'm interested in this conversation is that I consider myself to be a sapiosexual. I find, I thought it's a great combination of the intellectual and sexual or sensual. So that's what interested me.
How you doing? I am Jay Phoenix. I am the Vice President of Iris Great Lakes chapter of the national organization. It's important to me because I remember when he got elected, I sat on my couch and I refused to move. I was scared. I was afraid. I thought if I opened the door, there would be an apocalypse. I was waiting for things to just happen. And it scared me. But the one thing that I realized as we started having conversations about him being gay and wondering what he's going to do for funding for AIDS, HIV, and all of that, is that I realized at that point I got power. Because I realized at that point I was ready to resist. I was ready to fight for whatever we needed to do to make sure that we still maintain our lives and that we just kept moving within the court. Because it was a scary thought when that man took office. And so it just, like I said, empowered me to make sure that I was able to fight.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chase Cantrell. I'm the executive director of an organization called Building Community Value. We teach Detroiters how to do real estate development in their own neighborhoods, so exercising the power that they have to shape the built environment in their communities. I'm a lawyer since 2008, corporate and real estate law. So, again, helping us to exercise our power through transactional sphere. I'm also a proud member of Adobe, joined in 2016. And I was drawn to this topic because in my life, I've seen Black queer men who are lawyers, who are doctors, who are developers, who are politicians, the list goes on and on and on, who are powerful community members already in Detroit, historically and currently. And even when I'm thinking about what's happening right now with our current federal administration, we've always had to fight. That fight has never gone away. That has been the nature of our lives. And looking at the stage, we have some elders as well as a younger generation, but that fight is given on to each generation. And I'm seeing, there are two people on the stage running for office. Brother Google ran for office last year. Just people taking up that mantle and continuing the fight. So that's why I was drawn to the topic, interested in hearing what everyone on the stage has to say, but understanding that we don't need to be empowered, we're already powerful.
Hey everybody, how you doing tonight? How y'all doing?
Good.
So I don't know about my other brothers, but I'm gonna be the person on stage who makes y'all be engaged and turn up tonight. So when I speak, I'm gonna need y'all to talk back to me, okay? My name is Nguvu Tesare. I'm currently serving as the Vice Director of New Leaders Council Detroit, a national progressive organization dedicated to training and promoting the next generation of progressive leadership. I also am part of the Adobe Brotherhood, and I formerly was a long-serving member of a Black progressive organization by the name of New Era Detroit. What has drawn me to this event, first of all, just being humbled by the fact that I was invited, so thank you. But more importantly, as someone who is a same gender loving man, I find myself in a lot of professional spaces where I'm the only one. New Era Detroit is a Black nationalist, Pan-African organization that is very hyper-masculine, very heterosexually driven, and I was the only same-gender loving Black person in that organization during my 2.5 years. New Leaders Council Detroit, as progressive as we are, I think the only openly same-gender loving person in that organization. And so it's very important for me to surround myself with people like me, and people who affirm me, and people who love me for all of my humanity. And so I'm really excited to be here. I'm looking forward to the dialogue. I see a lot of my friends out here in the audience, and I have some friends on the stage, I have some mentors on the stage, and I have some ideological counterparts on the stage too. So I'm excited about the dynamic conversation we're gonna have. But I wear a lot of hats, and I have a lot of identifiers, but the identifiers I'm most proud of are my Blackness and my gayness. And so I look forward to standing in solidarity with all of you this evening and building together. Thank you for having me.
Good evening. My name is Gino Harris. I am the gallerist of Carcer downtown Detroit. I am also the director and co-founder of the Poor Man's Art Collective. What drew me to this event was the ability to be around people who are like me. Like it was said before, you find yourself in a lot of situations where you are the only one like yourself. And the ability to learn from others' experiences is one of the reasons why I accepted the invitation to be a part of this, to impart the wisdom and knowledge that I've learned dealing with the creative side, if you will, of the gay community, and trying to impart the wisdom that gay people, gay men, gay women are the same as everyone else, and to bridge that gap between the two ideas, if you will. And so I'm just here wanting to learn, to hear, and to listen, and to impart what I've learned through my experiences.
Good evening. My name is Curtis Lipscomb. I'm the Executive Director of LGBT Detroit. And I just want to say congratulations to you, Michael, and to the sponsors of tonight's conversation. Right now, my heart is beating rapidly because slightly nervous, but more importantly, overjoyed as being one invited to sit amongst some wonderful men that I've gotten to know over a period of time. Very proud to be one of the number. Glad that you've organized this conversation. And like our brother said, I see some friends in the room, some new friends in the room, some people that I'm very proud to call friends. I identify myself as a gold star homosexual. For those who don't know, Google it. With that said, always was attracted to the same sex, had a normal kind of upbringing where I wasn't harmed in this identity that the older people knew of. Very fortunate to come out at an early age. I came out at 15, and in high school, I was the gay recruiter. I recruited all the gay kids in high school, and we had a social club. Now, this was the late 70s, 80s, I think. I'm the second. Yeah, I'm number 2. And had a great high school experience with my friends, one being my best friend, Robert Taylor. I'm sorry, Robert Penny, that was Robert Taylor, who grew up together, had a wonderful opportunity to go to New York and get some education. But unfortunately, we ended up in New York at the worst time for gay people, period. And throughout this growing period, my friend had got infected with HIV and fundamentally died in my arms. So I walk in trauma, as I've seen many of my friends die right before me. And I lift up the name of Cornelius Wilson, because Cornelius Wilson created a space for us. And when I look in this room, it reminds me of men of color, at a time when I needed Black gay men to gather. And Cornelius Wilson and the other members organized 100 men to meet regularly at a church, an historic church, and we bonded and we shared. And this room right now reminds me of that. I look at John Tatum, I look at Derek Thornton, I look at my brothers who are in that room. And this just inspires me to know that we still love each other, we still care about each other. And I'm glad that many in Sterling, and I'm glad that many of you chose tonight to be here.
Hey everyone, good evening. My name is Denzel McCampbell. I am, how do I start? I identify as a queer Black man. I am here, thank you Michael for the invitation. I'm the Deputy Communications Director for a group called Engage Michigan. We help groups, social justice groups, with communication and media. I'm also the National Public Policy Chair for an organization called the Black Youth Project 100. We are an organization that fights for the liberation of all Black people, centering Black queer folks, centering LGBTQ folks, centering Black sex workers, the folks who are routinely left out of the liberation conversation. As we talk about Black Lives Matter, making sure that all Black lives are included in that conversation. What attracted me to the topic? So, I'm all about creating space and also having space for the communities that I belong to. I feel that when we're able to get together, when we're able to talk to each other, be in community with each other, and also organize together, we're able to make change and affect change, and also voice what we need for our communities in a powerful and political way. So, really excited to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I'm excited for the conversation.
Thank you all for coming, and I'm gonna give them a quick round of applause for this. In addition to making sure we had amazing men on this panel to represent Black gay men, we also want to make sure there was an age diversity because the experiences are different, and we do have a 40-year something age diversity gap on this stage, so that's kind of incredible too. So let's get started. So the way this panelist conversation will work is I'll ask questions, and anybody who wants to ask a question can. We ask that you not talk over each other. We ask that you be brief because there's 7 of you, and all of y'all want to talk. So, but I will ask some questions, and then we have about 30 to 45 minutes that we'll have for community Q&A. All of you were given an index card to make sure that you could write out your questions in advance, so you can learn how to be succinct with it and also direct them to the point. We also have a Damon Percy who will be joining us later to serve as our banner wife for the evening. When I say the word power, what does the word mean to you? And using your own definition, do Black, gay, bi, SGL men have power right now, today?
Turn it off, I guess. So power to me, and for the few people here who know me, I've spent my entire life, 29 years old, I'll be 30 in a few months, my entire life, I mean from early teenage years, with Black nationalist, activist type organizations. And power to me has always been freedom. Freedom to me has always been sovereignty. And you'll hear from my perspective as a Black SGL man, you'll hear me talk a lot in terms of race, and because I agree with my brother Denzel, when I talk about Black liberation, I'm talking about all Black people, which includes all of us in this room. And if we truly want power, then we can't be afraid to be free. And I think a lot of times, based on our behavior, we aren't really trying to be free. We pay a lot of lip service to being free, which means, we talk about the need to vote. We talk about the need to support Black businesses. We talk about the need to not tear down one another. We talk about the need to end the violence. But since the 60s, how much has really changed in terms of our freedom, in terms of the power dynamics between us and other communities in this country? And so to kick off the answers to that question, power to me is freedom. Freedom to me is sovereignty. Until we as Black people, as Black LGBTQIA, and every other alphabet that we'll come up with in the future, until we are willing to do what we need to do to be free, we'll never have power.
I agree as well. Power is freedom. I'm a leather man, and we know that there's different sects within the community. We have trans, we have individuals that identify with different pronouns. So being free, for me, is being who I am and being supported when I'm being free. So Onyx, which is an organization we don't know, just for BDSM people of color, we started out of a necessity because in the leather community we were not basically invited in. So we started and we became this group of people that surround each other and make sure that we are available to support you with whatever you need. So for me, it's about being free, not being judged for who I am or what I do. And it's all, that's what power is for me.
The words that came to mind for me, and I was thinking more in terms of how I personally feel about power for myself. So the words that came to mind for me are agency, the ability to do, to be able to say, this is what this calls for, I can do this, this is what I'm going to do. And then self-determination, that is to me a great, big part of power, to be able to say, you know, this is what I want to do, this is what I have decided or determined is best for me, and I'm pursuing that. And then focus, to be able to say, I'm gonna, you know, get that laser-like focus on what it is that I have determined to do. And I think that is shared. I mean, the fact that we are all here tonight says that there is at least the potential. Now, a lot of it has to do also then with how we manage to both focus and to combine power to be able to accomplish things.
So something I would add to that concept of being able to focus and to have agency, though, to have sovereignty, is to have a clear understanding of where our communities are. So, you know, Curtis mentioned walking in trauma. And I think a lot of us, when we're thinking about the sovereignty question, also have to think about what it would take for Black people to heal. So when I think of power, I think of the steps that would take us to actually get to that place of sovereignty. And I think healing, recognizing the trauma, understanding the healing, understanding what it takes to support each other is the beginning foundation to actually move towards that sovereignty that we're looking for.
For myself, I believe that power is the ability or the willingness not to sit still. I think that we have power. It's just that at certain times in our life, in certain situations, that sometimes the power is, you know, we have the power to affect more change, and sometimes we do not. But I feel like if we use that and the knowledge that we have gained in the certain circumstances and we come together, I think that the power grows. And if we continue to move forward and use that, then our power to affect more change will be more evident. So I believe that we have power. It's just that the ability to bring people together to realize what that power is and to use it is something that we have to work on.
I think every person has power. I mean, if we're looking across the board, there are some folks who are afforded more power than others in this country. There are some folks who are marginalized with the power that they have. I definitely agree when we're thinking about self-determination and the ability to folks to move freely. When we're talking about freedom, I would add to that piece the collective piece of using power as well, in a way that if we're talking about getting to be a liberated people or living in a sovereign space, how are we using that power to collectively work together? How are we using that power to put demands on folks who are oppressing us and also break out of that oppression and to create new systems that aren't oppressive? And how we're using that power to also lift up each other and also other folks who are not in the community with us, who we want to be in community with. So I think I definitely think we all have power, but also using it in a way that is liberation focused and also in a way that is healthy for the use power.
The subtitle of our event raised lots of different realms and spheres of influence and power, from the cultural and social to the political. Given that, where do you see Black gay men exerting real power and influence? Where can we flex in such a way that our experiences, talents, and intellect can be heard and respected? And where can we create opportunity pathways for ourselves and others?
I guess my answer to that question is this one.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think my response to that question is maybe part two about power. So power is people and money, right? And so what will the people do with those resources? What is it that we can organize around to show that power? What we've done very well in the current modern day movement is to organize around the HIV epidemic. Though we organized later than our white brothers, as it impacted them immediately in the early 90s, we are still the bearers, unfortunately, and the identifiable face of HIV. So when it comes to issues of health, I think we have a built-in power structure that we can walk in and make demands. I've been fortunate to be in rooms with other Black gay people nationally that's already created that walk. In DC, there's a plethora of people in the health care businesses that create spaces so that health concerns are addressed. You know, because if we're not well, we can't really talk about power. We can't talk about organizing. Because when we're not well, we're not even focused. We have so many things in our mind when we're not well. And so I argue that one of the things that we can use our power around immediately are issues around health. We have loud voices in AIDS service organizations and similar institutions where we are the directors of how funds are distributed. We're not in the spaces where decisions are made, but we definitely are in we're in spaces where decisions are made on our behalf. So I would urge that we stand up in spaces like Sept, at AIDS service organizations where a lot of us in leadership don't look like us. I know because I spent 11 years as a development director of the state's largest HIV/AIDS service organization, where money was targeted for our care.
Well, when we start talking about HIV, I guess that sort of takes me in a whole other direction. I was the first communication director for the National Minority AIDS Council and media coordinator for the National Task Force on AIDS Prevention, which was the first and only federally funded program to provide primary HIV prevention services to Black and other men of color who have sex with other men. So one of the things that I say a lot is that, at least for me, there has never been any gay lane. Every male in our society is socialized in the same way. And we are seeing playing out on the national stage, even as we speak, what our bully rape culture, empowers people to do. And so for me, I'm ready to create a gay lane, or at least a non-het lane, because to tell you the truth, that's how I personally, I identify as a non-heterosexual Black man, as a means of kind of incorporating all of the alphabet soup of identities. I mean, I don't care, I'm not concerned about however anyone else wants to identify themselves. We can find some point of coalition, then that to me is what we need to try to do. And in the meantime, at the same time, we really do need to have some conversations about what it means to be same gender attracted beyond who's the top and who's the bottom.
Dropping, yeah. Thank you for not dropping the mic.
So when we're thinking about where we can exert influence and what power is, I don't want us just to think at some large scale, right? Whether it's the federal government or state government. When I said earlier that I see us everywhere, I literally see us everywhere, all walks of life, leading our families, leading our church organizations, often leading neighborhood block clubs, looking at some neighborhood block club presidents and leaders on the stage. You can brighten your own corner. You don't necessarily have to run for office to exert power in your community or your families. So, when I'm thinking about, ways in which to actually have power in our communities, I'm thinking, look around where you are. Look at what your skills are. Look at what your personal influence can be, and seek to lead in those spaces. I think that if we continue to do that, that's really one way to really be present and really show up and say, this is what Black queer men do. Like we are in our communities leading. It doesn't have to look a certain way.
This is why I try not to let Chase go before me. We're always on the same page, so I love him so much. I have a few things to say. First, Curtis was absolutely right. I feel like in the health area, we have kicked ass as Black LGBT people. You know, I was born and raised in Lansing, Michigan, and I moved to Detroit about 11 years ago when I was 18. And the very first organization I got involved with was Empowerment Detroit. I don't know if any of y'all are familiar. I got some Young Brothers United brothers in the room today. And we did HIV prevention work. And ever since then, I've watched all of my brothers. We were just horny little teenagers at that time, tearing the city up. And they blossomed into these like fierce ass advocates. So I'm not running for office, so I may curse a little bit today. Now when I'm on the campaign trail again, I'll polish it up. But
the stage, this is a non-bipartisan.
So I definitely think we've kicked ass in health. One of the areas where we're starting to kick ass is politics. That is definitely an area where gay Black men specifically are really starting to flex, to use your word. I know we can't campaign from the stage, so all I'm going to tell you is to figure out who's running for City Charter Review Commission, or however you say that title. Figure out who's running for that, and then figure out who's on this panel. Yeah. So they're not endorsing them, but I personally am endorsing anybody who's on this stage who's running for that position. So if you see their names on the ballot, I won't say their names, but if you see them, vote for them. Ever since I ran in 2017 for City Council, I've seen so many other gay Black men jump into the political arena, and it's been very, very inspiring. Like Chase said, we are on the block clubs. We are leading ministries in our churches. We are, serving these organizations that are doing great work in our city, and we have been for a long time. And so I'm very, very proud of the Black LGBT community here in Detroit, because we're very unique. The level of engagement that we have as Black gay people here in the city of Detroit is unheard of in most of the major cities across the country. And so, you're looking at history on the stage with Curtis Lipscomb, the only Black LGBT nonprofit organization that's ran by Black in a Black community serving Black people. So I feel like we need to give him a round of applause for that. We have that in Detroit. We have, elected officials. We've elected a Black gay man. We've done that. And we ain't gonna talk about what he did once he got in, but we did it. You know what I'm saying? And so, we can still do it. And so I think that our power potential in Detroit is definitely on the political side of things. And then the area where I do think we need improvement is business. I think we need more Black LGBTQIA people owning and operating businesses, and then we need to support them. There is no reason on this earth that I live in an 82% Black city but can't find a gay bar that's owned by Black people. Why is that? So, I think it's important that, as we're looking for areas to flex our power, we consider the political realm and the business realm.
Hello? Okay. We're going to move on to the next question. A number of you on the panel are creatives and creative entrepreneurs. It has been said and proven time and again that Black gay men, particularly in the hood, drive popular American culture. We are among the most creative and innovative people in the world. Our slang, our dances, our style, our fashion, our art, our creativity is often reviled and denigrated when it premieres in the streets, even by some of our more conservative men Black gay men brothers. But then it goes on to be borrowed, stolen, or appropriated over and over again all around the world until what we create is mainstream and is a financial boom for others who are not us. How can we as a people first better celebrate and affirm what we create early? And how can we then partake in the profiteering of our ingenuity and innovation?
Well, my idea about that is, I work in the creative field. I am the curator down at the Carson Gallery, and I'm a collective of artists. And what I've learned over the years, I ran the collective for about 14 years, and what I've always strove to do I've always tried to do was to bridge the gap between the gay community and the straight community, but highlighting what it is that we do as gay people. And what I've learned is that, you know, once you get into those situations where you can support each other, give those creatives the ability to do, give them the resources to do, then they tend more to support each other. You know, when you give them the opportunity to, you know, for example, like I said, I run a gallery, and there are a lot of artists out there who identify with LGBT, but because of bureaucracy and not knowing where to go to learn how to show their work, you know, they tend to work in obscurity. But when you open up that door to them and say, okay, well, there's somebody else like you, a lot of times they don't even know that I identify with being LGBT. I'm an artist myself. So when they see someone like me, they're empowered to say, okay, I want to give it a try. I want to learn what I can learn so I can represent myself as a Black gay man and an artist. And, you know, just providing those opportunities for people and being strong in who you are as a gay male, as a creative, it opens up those doors. And I think that we have to continue to do that so more people who identify with that can and will do that to other people and, you know, bridge that gap.
Gino is being very modest. Gino runs the Hotter Than July Fine Arts Reception. He's been doing this for a number of years. Again, he's very humble, but Gino organizes one of the greatest gallery receptions where he intentionally reaches out to people who have who does not have the attention like others do, and he makes sure that there are patrons in the room to buy the art. It's one thing to have power, and it's another thing to have access. It's nothing intentional to make sure the artists have to work solo. And so I just want to commend Gino because he's a living witness to this. There are a number of talented people in the room. I just want to recognize Tall Guy as a very talented videographer. And I was blown away. I was floored by his talent. I mean, there are many talented people here, but it's people like Tall Guy and like Gino and others in the room that just need to stay uplifted and be assured that we will buy their art, that their art has value, we have money in our pocket, and that we'll purchase that.
For those who are not aware, Tall Guy is Kristen Paxson, actually managing our webcam as we speak. Thank you very much, Chris, for your work. Go ahead, Chase.
All right, so I was where the real estate hat. So it's not necessarily just about programming. You know, I talk a lot about creating Black space and preserving Black space, which I think is important. But I think the Car Center is actually a really good example, right? So it used to have a space that was threatened because of the real estate market, right? So when you are an artist and you have to scramble to find a new space to show your art or to sell your art, that becomes just a constant cycle and a constant problem of just looking for spaces where we can exist and we can actually thrive. So whenever I'm thinking about how do we show up and how do we be present, part of that is owning space. So I'm really proud of what Curtis has done in actually purchasing commercial property on Greenfield for LGBT Detroit and expanding that property as well. So having spaces where we can just be. And we can actually have these kinds of events, I think is extremely important, but for artists especially, they're continuously under threat. So figuring out ways to pool resources to actually purchase property, especially in a market like Detroit where real estate is not as expensive as in other markets.
I just want to mention some of them. I'm a writer myself, so that's the area of creativity that most excites me. And I've been doing it for over 50 years professionally, and I've had a few good opportunities. But one of the things that has really helped me is watching other people. And that's one of the great things that social media has done. You can get closer to people without having to ever necessarily meet them personally. I'm friendly with Patrick Ian Pope, the creator of Noah's Ark, and watch, the things that have gone on with him. We see him as, just someone who's doing something really special, but he goes through unbelievable. That's one quick thing that I just amazed me. When the wedding, the Noah's Ark, the wedding, the film came out, Logo told Patrick Leopold that whether or not the TV show would get another season would have to do with how well the movie did. And then Logo said, oh, but by the way, we're not giving you any money to promote the movie. They sent the stars of the movie to red carpets for events that they then did not have tickets for. So, and through all of this, I'm just sort of watching Patrick Ian's responses on it. And I mean, he has never said a mumbling word about these people fuck me over or whatever. And that was a really good lesson for me because he has continued to do what it is that he wants to do, regardless of these other things. So we have to look to some of the people who are doing it. Right now, the hottest Black non-hetero person I can think of in the creative world is a female named Lena Waithe from Chicago. She has kicked the door open for herself, and she's holding it open for anybody that thinks they're ready to come on through behind her. That's a lot of what we need to do, is to get away from the zero-sum game. I'm not trying to get mine, let me just see what I can do. Other people, RuPaul just got an Emmy. So, I mean, I think there are some good models of people who have managed to do something very important as a community.
I also want to, kind of in the spirit of, it doesn't take a lot. For this event, this whole event was probably cost us roughly about $1,100. I say that not to talk much about money, but to say that those monies that we received, we recycled right back into this community. We made sure that the caterer was a Black gay man. We made sure that the person who designed the flyers that you saw, the banners that you saw, was Black gay man. And we made sure that, as much as we could, try to make sure that the monies that we received came back to us. And that was a choice, not always an easy choice. Sometimes when working with Black creatives, we get in our own way, and I say that as a Black creative who has his own business. And oftentimes we don't believe in ourselves enough, and we will undercut ourselves. I mean, and there are some Black creatives in the room who I've had this conversation with, where, financially even, they're charging 25%, 50% less than their white counterparts in the same space who have half the talent. So sometimes it's about how we show up for ourselves and advocate for ourselves, and then do good work once we get the gig. So the name of our co-sponsor is the Counter Narrative Project. In the spirit of their mission of countering the narrative of Black gay men, I ask the following question. What do you believe the brand narrative of Black gay or SGL men in our country, our community, and to one another looks like? And is it a narrative that we need to change? We got a little bit from Jay. I think he's been real quiet on that stage trying to be cute.
I believe that the narrative is, I'm almost 50. I'll be 50 in November. So I've seen a lot. And I believe the narrative today is a lot more open. It's way different. I mean, to see people being more affirmed of who they are. And so that for me has spoken volumes and actually give me the courage to be who I am. I mean, I'm sitting on a stage in leather in front of people who I don't know my brothers, but it just gives you that power to look at. I mean, when you look at Real Housewives of Atlanta, and you see those brothers doing who they are, they're being who they are. So for me, the narrative is that we've gotten progressive and that we're just moving forward. It's actually exciting for me to see because it allows me to have courage for who I am.
Yeah. So I think I agree with that with the narrative. I think if you're thinking about public, I think there's a more open narrative for Black gay men, SGL folks. What I'm thinking about though is what is the narrative within Black communities with gay men, and more so, what is the narrative thinking about what are the personal interactions that we face, right? In the communities that we have, because it's on the main stage with TV and movies, and a lot of times in fashion and also pop culture, a lot of things show up like you mentioned, like things are stolen from us. But how are those interactions working within Black communities, and also how are folks accepting us more so than tolerating us, or tolerating the things that we bring? Because I think there's a difference, right? You can say, oh yeah, I love the way you talk, or I love the way you read that person, but I still don't really fuck with the way
We all grown in here. We all grown. Amen.
But I'm still not what you do in your personal time, right? So how are we improving that narrative in the Black community? And it's not on us, I'll say that, right? It's not particularly on us, but how do we also name that? And in those spaces that it comes up, I do think that needs to be changed. And I say that from the experience of organizing that I'm coming from with Black Youth Project 100. Because if we're talking about liberation from all Black folks, you're going to have to center the folks who are the most marginalized. You're going to have to, one, center them and also solve the issues that they're having. Because when you do that, you're also solving issues for the wider community. So if you're not actually addressing the narrative that folks have against us, the negative narrative that folks have of us, and we're not changing that, we're not going to get to a point where every one of us has what we need, and also that all Black folks have what they need as well.
So I came here prepared to talk about sex tonight. Because sexuality is one of those things that was on fire. So I'm gonna go right into it to answer this question partially. And then I think I'm gonna throw a torpedo in there. I might set Denzel's hair on fire with the second thing I might say. But first, I think that there is a narrative, a broader narrative in the African American community that Black gay men are promiscuous or sexual deviants. We get a really, really bad reputation in our broader community and broader society because of our collective embracing of our sexuality. And that is actually a narrative that I don't think that we should change at all. I think that is a narrative that we need to embrace and run with pride, because one of the beautiful things I love about being a Black gay man is that I don't have to subscribe to heteronormative standards when it comes to my sex life. And I tell my friends all the time, why would I base my relationship off the way straight people are doing it when they cheating on each other and breaking up and divorcing? So,
don't be shy.
And so I think it's important that we as gay Black men reclaim our sexuality. We are sexually free, many of us, and there's nothing wrong with that. And to that point, one thing that sickens me to my stomach is when I see other gay Black men down other gay Black men for what they know or think that Black gay man is doing sexually. Like, if we would stop internalizing heteronormative, oppressive ways of thinking, I really think that would free up our minds to focus on a whole lot of other things that we could be focusing on as a community. And so that's the first thing. The second thing or the second narrative that I think the broader Black community has of us as gay Black men is that we don't care about our broader Black community. And so, as someone who, and that's a narrative that's clearly wrong, but as someone who is in mostly Black straight spaces most of my life, that is a theme that I've always come up against as the only one. And, I do think that there's a real disconnect between us as Black gay men and our broader Black community, that I think that we also share some responsibility in working to fix. We all know the trauma that's been inflicted upon us by many of our own people. That's something that we all know. But at the end of the day, we're all still Black, and we're all still in America, and we're all still being oppressed by the same white supremacy. And so I see so many in the Black gay community acquiescing to the preferences and the whims of white people before they'll ever do the same for their own community. And yes, Black people in our own community have hurt us. They have traumatized us, but I promise you, they haven't done anything to us compared to what white supremacy has done to us. And so I think that the narrative is wrong that we don't care about our community. Clearly, we all do, we're Black. But I do think that we could be doing a better job to bridge that divide with our heterosexual counterparts.
I'm not sure what's up.
I thought you thought I was going to be victim blaming, so I didn't know.
No, well, so it's interesting. So that's a beautiful segue to my next question and commentary. So as mentioned, contrary to popular narratives about Black gay pathology, both inside of the Black community and outside of the majority community, many Black gay, bi, and SGL men are the most successful people in their families, with more than a few of us exhibiting overachiever syndrome and taking care of parents, grandparents, nieces, and nephews. Yet, despite our successes and sacrifices, it doesn't seem to translate into a general respect for our roles as the linchpins, bridges, and pillars of our community. Why do you believe that is, and what can be done about it?
I mentioned that one of the successes in our community has been our involvement in the HIV epidemic. One of our failures has been our lack of involvement in faith institutions. One of the reasons why we can be treated bad is because the center of our community, which is faith institutions, devalue us. So, in family settings, I can ask you to watch my dog, clean the house, take mom to the clinic, and do all these things because that's the reason why I'm overachieving. I'm looking for approval. I'm looking for approval from somebody. And what we have in faith institutions is power that we're not utilizing. So, I said again, it is in faith institutions where Black gay men fail, because it is those institutions that we thrive visually. We know who we are. We know what we've done. Hell, one of the most successful albums made in part was by a Black gay man. We all, y'all got that with James Cleveland LP, right? Right, yeah. Okay. I mean, he is one of the most notable, affluent gay men in history, in American history. But we failed because we've not uplifted him. I got more names. I'm not an active member of the, well, I do go to church, but I wouldn't go to churches identifiably known where a lot of gay men go, around the corner from my house, down the street where I live, the place where, you know, we just buried our queen. So I think that this is where we utilize our strength in areas that we fail, recognize that there is power, and say that, listen, family, I don't mind taking the dog out, taking mom to the clinic. I don't mind that. But when I go to Thanksgiving dinner, I'm bringing my boyfriend. We're not having a discussion. But I'm going to CVS just to make a run. I'm taking my husband. No conversation. We're just going. And so we're then lifting up our value in community. But that really is challenging our community center. That's our faith institutions.
Before you move on, just want you to clarify something for those who are listening, who are around the nation, who may not know about that church in Detroit that you're speaking of. Why wouldn't you go to that church where all those Black gay people are located that area, Aretha?
So,
I mean, you don't have a bigger thing, you know, Black people.
No offense to my staff who's an active member there. I just want to say that. Love you, very dearly. But I choose to go to a faith institution that welcomes us as our whole self. One Church Detroit, West McNichols, and West McNichols and Wyoming. Every Sunday, 11 o'clock service. I've always, yeah, that's what I can. I've always attended LGBT faith institutions, always have, because I know our power. We built other churches, why not build our own? Why not create spaces where me and my husband and my boyfriend or whomever can worship together freely? And so I've been in those other spaces where we exhibit, and I think Guru touched upon it. Why must I whisper when I sit next to the other gay men at that prominent church? Why are we whispering? Why are you behaving differently when I see you at the church, but didn't I see you at Todd's last night? Or at the Woodward the day before, or the famous store? What? I just can't figure out why we have, we have power because this church will not operate as we famously know. When the choir director leaves, the church collapses. So those churches that I mentioned, they're full of people like me. They're not walking in our walk. I don't see them in their intentionality to spread the word in spaces where people need the word. Other thoughts?
So I've talked a lot. So does anybody else want to say anything?
Chase, you want to take a little bit on this one?
So yes, we are linchpins in our families most often. I have custody of my 12-year-old cousin. I've had him since January. I have some people in this room who have helped me take care of that boy since January. I have a 26-year-old cousin who just got out of jail a month ago. He's staying with me to get back on his feet. I, after my mother, make the most money in my family, which ain't saying much. And I happen to be very blessed to have a lesbian mom who halfway got it when I came out to her. And yes, we don't get a lot of the respect that we deserve in our community. But for me, when I sit back and I look at the lay of the African-American community, at least the portion of our great, beautiful community that I've come in contact with over my 29 years, I actually see a lot of improvement. You know, as somebody who joined Black nationalism at the age of 15, my first organization was the New Black Panther Party. And the guy who, I was living in Lansing, Michigan, and the guy who brought me into the organization lived in New York. And once I found out what their ideology 15 years ago was on homosexuality, I felt compelled to tell them, like, look, bro, I want to start this chapter, but I think y'all should know, I like men, I'm gay. Never heard back from them. And then my next organization was the National Black United Front in DC, where I was the vice director of that chapter. And I went back into the closet. Now, I've been open my whole life. But to be a part of this organization, because of my experience with the New Black Panther Party, I realized that I had to go back in the closet. And I chose to go back in the closet and did not tell anybody about my sexuality. When they found out, it was a lot of trauma in the organization. However, I was allowed to stay in the organization, and I stayed and I kept doing my work. But then, in 2015, I joined New Era Detroit, and many of you know who New Era Detroit is. And in my interview, they asked me, look, bro, is there anything about you that can be used against you in the organization that we should know about? And I was like, well, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I am gay. But look, if you don't want me to be a part of your organization, I won't be. You know what I'm saying? So over 15 years, I finally had built up this skin that said, if you just accept me for who I am. And you know what Zeke said to me on personally? He was like, bro, I don't give a fuck about who you sleep with. If you know anything about Zeke, he's the hardest dude you'll ever come across. He said, I don't give a fuck about who you sleep with. Are you willing to put in this work for our people? And I said, absolutely. And I served that organization for 2.5 years. And so I said all that to say, we have made significant progress in our community in just a short amount of time. And I think it's important that sometimes we take a step back and look at the progress that we have made. We forced ourselves to be heard in the church. We have forced ourselves to be embraced by this country. You look at polls, you look at Noah's Ark, you look at the cultural, look at Real Housewives of Atlanta. We're forcing this country every single day to see us and to recognize us. And it's not where we want it to be. But I think we should be proud of ourselves for the resilience that we've shown. If it hadn't been for people like Curtis, there would be no polls. If it hadn't been for our elders who are over the age, I won't even call you an elder, but if you're over the age of 40, that's the reason why those of us under 40 can be openly gay today. Because we've been resilient for decades. And so while we're not where we want to be, I think it's important that we always take a step back and recognize the progress that we've made as a people.
So we gave ourselves some big ups. This is a little bit of a challenge to ourselves as this next question. So there are a couple of revival movements happening right now. One is a counter-resistance to the war on women, as represented by Me Too and Time's Up. One is a war on transgender bodies and their right to both be and be affirmed, not merely accepted or tolerated. And yet, far too often, in our love and reverence of masculinity and deference to patriarchy, Black gay men can be just as toxic in our treatment and attitude towards our sisters and trans community as any misogynist or anti-trans conservative. Yet we owe the gains of the LGBTQ rights movements to the early bravery of trans activists, and we owe the first Black gay men movement out of the 80s and 90s of the Joseph Beams, Marlon Riggs, and Essex Hempfields to the teachings of Black feminism and the support of Black lesbians during that initial AIDS crisis. So given that history and that debt, why aren't we better allies to our sisters and trans people? And what should we be doing to be the kind of allies to them that we want everybody else to be to us?
I've been holding back, so now this is a good one for me to jump in on. You know, when I was coming out, it was even worse than it is now, much worse. I mean, people of different genders within the non-hetero community did not interact at all. And the things that males said about females, I don't know what the females were saying about the males, but you know, the references to fish and stuff like that, those things were very difficult to get past in those days. Now, what has amazed me more recently with the younger people that I know is that I see more young males with female BFFs. Now, they may not always be non-hetero too, but the point for me is really this. A lot of this, once again, goes to the society in which we live. What I was saying earlier about the bully rape, paradigm that most of us are raised with. So that, as far as I could remember, the whole notion was that no female was going to be more male than I am, even if I am a feminine man. And I think that's, that's another one of these things where, for want of a better phrase, in our modeling a lot of our behavior because there was no other way that we knew, in the heteronormative way, we have taken on a lot of those heteronormative standards and issues, including, a lot of misogyny and transphobia. And I think that's something that's why I believe it's important for us to come up with a gay lane or a non-het lane. Because in the process of developing that, we can start to work through some of these issues between us that are holding everyone back. Because the reality is that we, on our own, whether we call ourselves Black gay men, gay Black men, SGL, two-spirited, or whatever, on our own, we are still a small microcosm of the greater community. And the only way it seems to me that we are going to get any kind of power base, if you will, is by coalescing with other people that have something in common with us. So that's incumbent upon us to change.
I think a lot has to do with fear. I personally will take the time out to speak to my trans sisters and brothers. And a lot has to do with what we don't know is the unknown, and not knowing exactly where their mindset is, or so I believe that it's just fear, and fear can be very crippling, and it's unfortunate because we're already a minority. Why are we pushing someone else aside just because they're different? We're different, and why are we pushing someone else aside? So one of the wonderful things I will always push Onyx, because I will tell you that for a lot of people it's changed lives or whatever, but we are one of the only inclusive leather groups out there. So we take our trans brothers, our trans sisters, and we build a home for them as well. I just, like I said again, I'll be 50, and I don't understand why we as minority would be discriminatory against someone else just because they're living their life and living their true self.
So I would say, you know, it's really interesting that you see a lot of transphobia in Black gay male, Black gay male community, cis Black gay men. In a way that, if we think about the things that a lot of trans women are killed and the reasons why they're killed and what folks are, the folks who killed them are carrying, a lot of are the similar lanes in the homophobia that we see from those same folks, right? And in a way that, like, so many trans folks and gender non-conforming folks have helped me along the way in my life, in my career, and just the day-to-day living. And we have, like, what is it this year that I think is now 23 trans women of color have been murdered. And we see in media how folks are misgendered, and we see how folks are, and their lives are not being affirmed. And I think we have an obligation, well, I know we have an obligation in the spaces that we are. We just talked about how many Black men in the spaces that we are empowered and we hold, and to actually push back against that narrative and to push back against those thoughts, and also look in ourselves and see what oppressive things that we're holding towards trans folks and gender non-conforming folks. Because these same things the same source of this hate that they're experiencing are things that we're fighting back against as well, or have fought back against as well. So looking at that and say, yeah, you're experiencing this and that's not my fight, I think you're holding those same oppressive things. And yeah, I think, I'm trying to get on my thoughts on all this because there's so many places I'm trying to touch on. We have to also show up. We have to show up. We have to realize that as we talk about where we are now, where we come from, the security that we have now that trans women don't have, and how do we ourselves be in a way shields for folks, and also in a way to be in those rooms and turn over the table for trans women, for trans folks, for gender non-conforming folks, to say that we're not going to stand for this shit and that it needs to change. We have to do that. We have to get over our own biases and oppressions.
For me personally speaking, you know, when I came out, I think back when I came out, and you know, I've never had the opportunity to be around a lot of lesbian women or transgender. It wasn't until I became much older that I had the opportunity to be around them and learn that their struggle was a lot similar to ours. And I think a lot of what the problem is, or the issues are, is you know, being able to bridge the gap, lack of access to people who are the same, but you know, different, you know, and they have the same issues. So being able to put yourself into someone else's shoes, if you will, to know that they're suffering the same issues that we are. You know, I think that, you know, if we can do that, then, you know, we can be there more to support people who are in the LGBT XYZ, you know, the different alphabets, if you will. We can learn to support them. You know, I just think it's access, you know, because like I said, for me personally, it wasn't until I was 35 before I met a transgender person, you know, and I had the opportunity to learn from that experience. And now in the current role that I have now, being at the Car Center and working with artists, I met so many more, and my knowledge base has grown because of those experiences. And you know, I just feel that if we're given the opportunity to be in certain situations where we can meet those kind of people, then we can learn more and we can do that.
Well, thank you. I just want to again lift up the fact that a number of us care about our sisters and our brothers, whether they be trans, gender women, trans men. So I recognize that there's a lot of care. You heard applause. There's a number of people in this room that care about us wholly. But I do want to lift up what Denzel said, which is very important. It's about being present. I have had some wonderful opportunity to be in rooms with the Department of Justice, the FBI, Detroit Police Department, Highland Park Police Department, in annual spaces, not only at Palmer Park, but in my office, to address the harms for most Black trans women receive. And so there has been a concentrated effort to raise the awareness of and to find solutions to reduce these harms. But again, the majority of the room don't necessarily look like us. So I applaud what you and the sponsors have done in this great room. It's an opportunity for us to share our thoughts. There are additional spaces where I know we're welcome. I bring up that in my office, we met with the Department of Justice many times to have this similar kind of forum. And once the forum was held, there were only 2 Black gay men in the room. And I felt bad. I didn't have much to say. I just was a note taker. But I could tell by the sisters giving their account of their experiences, let's say surviving, that they felt defeated. They literally walked off the stage. And this was just a couple months ago. So I don't know if they felt that we didn't care or don't care physically in this space. I recognize that we do. I would urge that we show up intentionally so that they can see evidence of that. Thank you.
Could you also speak, I mean, as much as I'm glad we are having a real robust conversation about trans women, also the conversation was also about cisgender women as well, who we also fail to support. So could you speak also on that for us?
Absolutely, I was already with you on that. To answer your question, why have we been such shitty allies to cisgendered women and trans women? I personally think it's 2-part. One, survival as Black gay men in a world that for many, many, many decades was killing us in astronomical numbers because of our sexual preferences, just like our trans sisters are being killed today. And 2, cowardice. Because we as cisgender, those of us who consider ourselves to be cisgender, same gender loving men, you know, we can code switch. Okay, somebody can explain it, but we got real comfortable. We can code switch. People can't always tell if we're gay. Many of us, many people, if we didn't tell them we were gay or same gender loving or queer, they would never even know. And so we've gotten real comfortable as men fitting more and more and more into a society that for so many decades truly, truly oppressed us in ways that it doesn't oppress us anymore. And so the number one way we can be a better ally is by speaking up. I like what Denzel and Curtis talked about in terms of being present, but speaking up. When I hear other men or see other men disrespecting women, I speak up. When I see other men and other women disrespecting trans people, I speak up. And so, you know, a lot of the spaces where I'm in, they think it's still acceptable to call transgender women trannies. They still think it's acceptable to denigrate our trans sisters. I got brothers and cousins in my family who still think it's acceptable to call women bitches, right? I speak up. And so, you know, I acknowledge the fact that I have my own internalized toxic masculinity that I'm working to disable every single day. If we all are honest about the toxic masculinity that we've internalized for whatever reason, whether it was survival, whether it was to fit in more, if we are honest about that toxic masculinity that resides within each and every one of us and make the determination every day to heal from that, we'll be better allies to our sisters and our trans sisters.
I'm also gonna, as a segue to our next question, speak on the fact that a lot of folks who engage in misogynoir and misogyny and anti-trans conversations, but particularly misogynoir and misogyny, and also Black folks who don't particularly care to be around other Black folks, a lot of that is some childhood hurt, some teenage hurt, some high school hurt, some college hurt, our mama hurt, maybe our mama said some stuff. Your mom is not all black women. The bullies in school are not all black folk. And I think it needs to be said that if you are still carrying around that trauma 20, 30, 40 years later, see a therapist so you can love on yourself and love on your people some more, because it is not everybody else's fault. It is those individuals. And we see it a lot, because it's generally the explanation I'm given. Well, you know, women are so deceiving. You know, my mama, my sister, my auntie, you know, ignoring all the other women who were there, present and uplifting. So there's that. Black gay men are Americans. So we reflect the popular American culture, and that we are among those who suffer from depression and anxiety at alarmingly high rates. Suicide is steadily rising for Black young men, including our young men, for the first time in American history. 1 out of every 2 of us are expected to acquire HIV in our lifetime, despite new medical understandings that those who are virally suppressed through treatment have little to no transmission risk. And there has existed for 5 years or more a little blue pill those who are negative can take to stay negative. And yet we're the least likely to have access to or take advantage of either HIV treatment or PrEP. And crystal meth has finally crossed over from the white gay world to the Black one in serious numbers in cities across America. What can we be doing as brothers to take better care of ourselves and one another and understand that we are people worth fighting for?
I think the most important thing is stop thinking that you're not minding your business. Because a lot of times we don't want to get into other people's business, thinking that they're going to push us away. I recently realized that a friend of mine had just disappeared. I didn't know what was going on. And so I did a wellness check to make sure that they were okay. Because we don't do that enough. We're worried about what's going on Facebook and all this different stuff. We're not looking out for each other. And so I think the most important thing is that we start looking, when that brother disappears for a little while, you need to call check on him and see where he's at and what's going on with him. I think that we've lost a lot of community within ourselves as far as gay Black males. We just don't, the love is not there anymore, in my opinion.
I think it takes more than love, though, right? So when Michael mentioned, if you're still holding these things in, go see a therapist. If we're saying, do a checkup on your brothers. But if you then have to refer someone to resources, we've seen the budget for the Department of Health in the city of Detroit slash tremendously over the past 20 years. We've seen federal budgets for health departments also slashed. I mean, the attack on the Affordable Care Act, the Obamacare, right? So we have to not only check up on each other, but we have to advocate for policies and vote for representatives who actually will understand the necessity of healthcare, especially for Black people. And I don't think that we're doing that enough. I don't know if that's a question that we're posing of folks who are running for office, whatever the offices are. We have to be really intentional about really advocating for that.
I'd like to lift up Adobe. Applause. Let's lift up Adobe. Though I appreciate Chase's comment, I think of myself as an active member, and it goes back to the question of power. We have all the tools within to save ourselves. Adobe is one of those tools. So here we have a space where maybe I don't know how to tell you that I'm not well, that I don't know what Truvada is. I don't even take aspirin, right? What medication out there to take care of this gout? You know, what we hardly do as males is just talk about health problems. We're not built like that. And so the great thing about the Dodi, for those who don't know, I mean, that's another, if you're in the Dodi, brother, raise your hand. So if you don't know a Dodi, keep your hand up. If you don't know a Dodi, find these men, because I'm not going to bore you about a Dodi, because I can't bore you about a Dodi. But to answer the question at hand, what Adobe has done is create a space where men can get together to heal, to share openly their concerns, to maybe talk about the lacks of education, lack of access, lack to affirmation, hell, lack to touch. And so it is in spaces like that that I've witnessed healing, where men have not been touched or held in years, who don't know how to express themselves, or less even know what resources are around them locally to get a solution met. And so for over 30 years, Black gay men have gathered annually and now regionally to take care of one another. So again, find those brothers that raise their hands. They'll tell you all about the settings where we gather and share and then jump the broom, so to speak, to advance.
So just to add on to what Curtis said, though, regarding Adobe, the first time that I went was 2016, and the idea of an intergenerational space where elders could share their learned experiences with younger people as we're going through our own personal traumas, they've been there, right? They've gone through similar things. They've gone through the struggle, they've gone through the fight, and being able to heal in that space with them was probably one of the most powerful experiences I ever had. And other Adobe brothers have had similar experiences. So, like Curtis said, talk to some of us about that.
Anyone else before we move on?
Yeah, I'm not gonna make this an Adobe testimonial, but since we're on the topic of Adobe, I'll share my personal story. At that time, I was dealing with a really, really, really bad depression, and I was drinking very, very heavily at that time in my life. And I didn't know if I was an alcoholic. I didn't know if I was just using alcohol in that time in my life to, cope with whatever I was dealing with. But I knew I needed some help. And so at my very first Adobe retreat, well, before I go there, I had looked all over. I had looked all over for help. Like, who can I talk to? Is there any Africans in their place that I can go to and talk to somebody? Any Black people that are professionals in this area that I can talk to? I couldn't find anybody. And it just so happened that I got invited to my first Adobe retreat, and they had an Alcoholics Anonymous course with nothing but gay Black men. They're healing and loving each other and sharing stories. And I'll forever be indebted to Adobe, because Adobe was the first and only space that I ever was touched by another man, and it wasn't sexual. And that is so rare for us, to be touched by other gay Black men and it not have an ounce of sexual connotation. And so, I think that I had wanted to say something earlier, I forgot what it was, but clearly the ancestors wanted us to talk about Adobe, for gay Black men in this room. Link up. You can be a part of Onyx. You can be a part of the Black Bear Brotherhood. We don't require anything from you. All we say is come to the retreat every year, come to the regional things. Every April, we have a regional retreat here in Detroit. So be looking out for that. Shameless plug.
We have a Monday chat every Monday from 6 to 8 p.m.
A Monday chat every Monday, 6 to 8 at somebody's house. There's one in Chicago coming up soon. So I think it's really important, while we're talking about all the things that we need to be doing as Black gay men, let's lift up those things that have been done and are still going on 3 decades later. Because, I'm just really proud of us. Like, we are so hard on ourselves that we really don't take the time to really lift up the positive things that we're doing for each other. So I'm glad Adobe got that moment.
So I just want to say one last thing, which is that if you don't remember any of the people here who affiliate with Adobe, you can go to adobedetroit.org and get that information there as well. The principles, it seems to me, of the organization are something that anyone can definitely appreciate. The other thing I want to say very quickly, though, is several years ago in Chicago, I attended a conference, the title of which was Race, Sex, and Power. At that conference, I encountered more Black, non-heterosexual, professional academics than I've ever seen in any one location. And most of them, the vast majority of them, were under 30. We have, some people who can help us develop some programs. And I just want to say this about, anyone who's been in any kind of graduate situation knows that if you're going for a doctorate or whatever, you need to have something, a research project that, you can base your dissertation on. We need to be providing these kinds of research subjects to people that are actually going through the process of getting these degrees. They're busy studying pinning diapers on flies with boxing gloves on. They need to be talking about practical things that impact our community and developing responses that will have some impact. And because that's what they're really about.
And yeah, we did talk a lot about ability, but I just want to emphasize and raise the attention to your question and the reason why ability was addressed. Because as one social group, there are two others in this room that has created this space. So Onyx and Black, their Brotherhood. So there's a space where the intersections occur. And so I recognize, and I think many others recognize, that you can be your authentic selves in a number of spaces to do different things. We just recognize I recognize the answer to your question about health. This one space could be of use to your question.
Last two questions before we go to the question and answer section with the people in the room. And we have a almost full house, which was wonderful. Thank God. It is an election year, and obviously BBB has decided to make its formative mark in Detroit on get out the vote efforts and making sure people can effectively respond to getting purged from the voter rolls. And as you have not noticed in the back, we are doing voter registration checks and voter registration. This indicates a certain investment, however, or belief in electoral politics by our group. So I'm curious about your faith and belief in our system of government and our role in it. What role should we be trying to play in the political sphere? Or are we just repeating the mistakes of the 70s and 80s by once again putting our faith in electoral politics to fix the problems of the Black community?
Okay. So electoral politics won't save us. It won't save us. And I say that to start off about what I'm about to go into. If we're thinking about where we need to go for liberation, where we need to go to be free, where we need to go to have what we need to survive, to live the best lives that we want to live, I think we have to look at it in a multifaceted approach, right? And electoral politics and policy can, and I would say should be a part of it, but it shouldn't be the only thing. And I would say, if you're going back to the civil rights era in the 60s and going to the 70s, a lot of those folks who were engaged in all of these, like there are folks who were working on policy, there are groups that were saying, I'm not going to mess with policy at all. You had Black Panther Party in a different way. A lot of those folks were wiped out. And a lot of those folks were infiltrated, they were killed, they currently still sit in jail. And they had those plans to say, okay, policy might be a part of this, but we're also going to organize our communities, we're also going to do these things on our own, we're going to have our own free lunch program and not free breakfast program and not depend on any type of education system to do that for our children. Those are the things that I think have to be mimicked today. Also updated and changed about what we're facing today. And we have to have folks who are working on policy, who are in the electoral space, but also folks who are organizing communities, who are creating programs, health programs, mental health programs, our own education programs. The Detroit Independent Freedom School does this. And creating the things and modeling the alternatives that we need to have in our communities. I take one thing, for example, I identify as an abolitionist. I don't believe in prisons and jails. I can talk more to you about that because I know it's a whole other topic. But I bring that up because the first thing folks ask me is like, okay, what do we do without them, right? And we have to make sure that we're creating alternatives that, one, keep us safe and also have accountability. right? And I will argue that our current criminal injustice system actually does not provide that. So electoral politics does not, it will not get us free. I do think it's important, but we have to have a mindset of it. It's like, this is one part on this path towards liberation, on this path towards freedom that we're trying to achieve, and we won't find it within the system that we have currently. But we can find safe houses for our folks and harm reduction policies that actually get us to the point that we need to be. Others?
So
these two are the next person. I think Chase trying to hide, but we're gonna make them speak on this.
So I never wanted to get into politics. I ran for city council last year because I had a race that was just a hot mess. And I was really angry because these individuals who were running, I just did not believe truly had the best interest of people like me at heart. And so I felt like God told me, look, if you got a problem with who's running, you get in there and you run yourself. And that was some growth for me because as a Black nationalist, as a Pan-African, my dream for us as a people is to have our own sovereign nation as African descendants. And I agree with Denzel wholeheartedly that electoral politics is only a part of the solution, and it's a small part of the solution. And to be completely honest, I look at electoral politics as a stopgap measure to the ultimate goal of us having our own shit. Because in my humble opinion, a big part of why we have a lot of the problems that we have today is rooted in our experience as African people here in the United States, a white supremacist corporation that was literally designed and still runs on the backs of Black and brown people. And so under no circumstance should our long-term vision as Black people be to keep trying to tinker around the edges of this white supremacist country, hoping that it's gonna be ultimately what it needs to be for us. It will never be what it needs to be for us. Now, in the meantime, you got people like two brothers on this stage who are running to revise the constitution of our city. You have people on the stage who have run for office to try to, have some type of power to trickle down to our community. But that's only because we as a collective are not on the same page in terms of what our freedom should be. And so we are repeating a lot of the same mistakes from the 60s and 70s. And it's rooted in fear. We're afraid, we're scared to die. The reason why all of our people were wiped out, who spoke about freedom, who spoke about sovereignty, who spoke about independence, the reason why they were wiped out is because they were onto something. And we all, if we're honest with ourselves, know deep down inside what it's gonna take to be free. I'm gonna channel my inner Louis Farrakhan right now. We know what it takes to be free. Blood and treasure is what it takes to be free. But we don't wanna get that. We're too focused on our material things, on our material comforts. We gotta be willing to die for freedom. And until many of our people are fed up with what's happening in this country to us, people like the three of us on this stage who are in the political world are just gonna continue tinkering on the edges of this society, hoping one day that the majority of our people wake up. Because I think the three of us would all agree that electoral politics is not where it's really at. But if I can convince my people to join an organization and start doing revolutionary work to free ourselves, then I guess politics is just where I have to be for the time being until we all wake up our collective consciousness.
Just want to follow that.
Okay, so I think we all agree that electoral politics is not going to be the avenue through which we fix everything, right? But we're heading towards a nation that's majority people of color. And if we understand the power that we actually do have within the electoral system, tinkering at the edges, we are actually growing in the amount of power that we could exert if we wanted to exert it. So one of the issues that I have is that we're moving in silos. That, if you have an organization, if you have grassroots organizations, if you have people who are in politics, if you have lawyers who are pushing policies, if you have someone on the stage just became a staffer for a state representative, right? So I mean, if you have all these people in these different sectors who are not communicating, we will be tinkering at the edges because we're not actually advocating and moving a single kind of narrative and a single purpose. We're disjointed, often because we're disenfranchised. So part of it is an education process about what our power actually is, about the extent of that power, about the growing power that we have, and how we actually collaborate and communicate to use it. So as we're moving towards sovereignty, again, there needs to be various mechanisms that we're using to advocate for ourselves and to get that freedom. And I agree with Ngugu that the only way to actually gain a sovereign nation is to question. That is the only way. It's revolution. But until that time, if that time ever comes, we have to figure out how to coordinate. Even in revolution, we would have to figure out how to coordinate and collaborate, right? So start there. If we're moving towards that revolutionary phase, we have to figure out how we stop operating in silos.
And the electoral process has not been a total, bust for us. We see in the South now that, a lot of Black people are about to assume some pretty significant positions. If anything, from what I see, those of us in the urban areas of the North, that was when the civil rights movement was going down for the South, the North wasn't really feeling it. I mean, I'm from Chicago. And when Martin Luther King came to Chicago, he came the closest to get killed by his own reckoning that he ever came. So we need to understand a little bit of the greater complexity. I agree that it's not the end all be all, but in the meantime, it is something that can at least provide us, whether it's tinkering around the edges or whatever, with an opportunity to make some kind of change in our immediate environment. I think, especially on the local level, we really can do a lot more than we realize if we elect people.
And to Chase's point, to Chase's point, though, all we got to do is go across the Atlantic Ocean and look at the continent of Africa. South Africa is a majority Black country, but it's ran almost completely by white people. And so I don't want us to rest our hats on this fairy tale notion, not saying that you were engaging in fairy tales, but this fairy tale notion that because America is going to be majority Black and brown at some point, that's going to change the dynamic for us. It ain't. And even if we did take over this country numerically, we still have institutions that need to be dismantled. And, the colonizers one of the words you used, right? Colonizers. The colonizers who came over here and took this land from our brown brothers and sisters, the natives, they instilled such a genius system that it's almost impossible to dismantle this thing. The only people who can dismantle it is themselves. And, we as Black people are sitting back and watching them do it right now. But, they're really the only ones who can tear this down. And so I really just want us to remember, at least from my humble perspective, that the only way we truly gain freedom is through sovereignty. And Black people being involved in the electoral process is really just a stopgap measure. Because as much as I love Stacey Abrams, as much as I love Andrew Gillum, as much as I love Garland Gilchrist, our next lieutenant governor, vote for him on November 6th. Oh, sorry, my bad. As much as I love them, no matter what position as much as I love Obama, no matter what position we as Black people get in, those gains that we make, which are very small, if you look at American history, have always been wiped out. Every single gain we've ever had in this country has been wiped out. And they keep trying to wipe out the gains that we got left. And so why would you want to continue to be a part of a system that does that to you, that genuinely hates the idea of you making progress? And so I just implore all of you out here who are not already engaged, and most of y'all are, we're really talking to our cousins who ain't here tonight. But, so hopefully they're gonna see this on social media. But I just implore everybody to get involved. Find an organization and get involved and start figuring out what your part is in this freedom game. Because to be honest, I'm tired of waiting. I'm 30 years old. I took my great-grandmother to Brazil in May for her 91st birthday. And while we were in Sao Paulo, we experienced a lot of the same racism that we experience here. And so I sat down and had a conversation with her, and we talked about it. And she said to me, you know, baby, it ain't nowhere near as bad as it used to be. And even though I knew she was right, she wasn't saying that in the sense of, oh, you need to be grateful that it's not as bad as it used to be. She said it with a sadness in her voice, like, damn, I can't believe my great-grandbaby still has to deal with the same thing I have to deal with. I refuse to be that 91-year-old great-grandfather having to look my great-grandchildren in the eye saying, damn, you still got to go through this. I want us to be the generation that stands up and says, once and for all, we as descendants of African slaves in this country no longer want any parts of this white supremacist society. Clearly I got fired up, I apologize. That's my passion.
I don't know why we got your show. The final note that I would make is that we definitely can't forget about Black folks in the South also, especially Black gay folks, Black LGBTQ folks in the South. We so often think it's so conservative down there that, oh, none of us are down, but we know there's a vast amount, actually a majority of Black folks in the country live in the South. And I also say that to bring up, like, folks down there are creating what they need because they know the governments around them aren't showing up for them. They don't give a fuck about them. So if we can look to the South and also uplift folks in the South, we so often just forget about them. That is a point that we should be doing. I will also say, if you look at the city of Jackson in Mississippi, they have taken in what electoral politics can be, also combined it with organizing, and their push is to make Jackson the most radical city in the United States, Black radical city in the United States. So those are things that we can see, the limits of electoral politics, but also what we can do for our people right now.
Last question for the panel from me, and then we will be taking questions from you. You all have index cards, so you can come up with some questions for us. We also have some questions probably from Facebook Live. We'll also be asking as many as we can. We ask that you take, when you give those questions, that you don't take more than 2 minutes because we ain't got a whole lot of time. So let's end this moderated portion of the panel on a message of hope. My world has been carefully curated to only have those around me who love and support me, all of me, and who don't make my sexuality an issue, or my race for that matter. Since publicly announcing this event, BBB has received quite a few hate comments from the outside world in response to our promotion for the night's evening's events. And it was a reminder to me of the Black gay children and elderly who are still vulnerable to those who hate them for who they are and who do not always have the privilege of carefully curating their world like some of us can. This panel represents some of our best and brightest of Black gay SGL by Detroit from their 20s to their 60s, operating and thriving in a range of professions and services. So what message of hope, encouragement, or comfort can you offer those who are still being bullied or terrorized at home or at school, or still struggling with their sexuality as something abominable or religiously prohibited? Or those who have been forced by circumstance back into the closet for survival, or just too scared, too underexposed, or just unable to live a life that is unapologetically Black and gay? What words do you have for them today? Each one of you.
It may not get better. You can.
Turn the mic on.
Turn the mic on.
Yeah, I don't want to be the cliche again, but it does get better. Again, I'm sitting on a stage in front of my fellow gay brothers, and you couldn't tell me I was going to do this a couple of years ago. So the courage, keep the courage, keep hope, and just continue to be yourself and don't let anyone bring you down.
Okay, so those who know me know, finding hope is often a difficult thing, but I would be honest that in fact it may not get better, right? And that the only way to find that hopefulness is to find something inside of yourself, to be courageous and to actually fight. if that means breaking away from painful situations, if that means finding a way to advocate for yourself and for others, like the only true way to grab hold of that hope is to actually find that courage within yourself. And that may be, you know, if you're going back into the puzzle to survive, if you're finding those survival mechanisms, we have so many resources now to find others that are like us, right? So finding the Onyxes, the Black Bear Brotherhoods, the Adonis, etc., to find those supports, to find others who are like you, who can help you to nurture that courage and find that courage within yourself to be who you are.
Piggybacking off of what Chase said, you know, my words would be, we're coming for you. We're coming for you. You know, I get really emotional when I think about my involvement with the Dodi, because I think about the men who were at my first retreat who were in their 80s, men who were born in the 30s, and everything they had to go through in life as gay Black men so that I could be my open, authentic, I don't give a fuck self. And so to the future, I say, those of us who stand on the shoulders who come before us, we're coming for you. We're running for office to obtain a little bit more power so that we can create safer spaces for you. We're creating community organizations like LGBT Detroit that are ran by us and owned by us, so you can have spaces that are authentically Black and don't just focus on your sexuality, but focus on who you are as an African, who you are as a Black person. We're creating businesses that you can fraternize so that you can go work for people who you don't have to worry about firing you because you're gay. We're coming for you. And so my message of hope for all of us here is, it took us hundreds of years to get into the hole that we are in. It'll take us hundreds of years to get out. But I really believe in my spirit that we're in a very, very fast-paced moment in our liberation struggle. And this generation, this time that we're in with the generations that are in this time right now, we're gonna look back 100 years from now and say, we did the damn thing. And so like Chase said, find those organizations that are in existence right now and do your part so that 100 years after you're gone, the next generation will have it better than you.
For me, my message of hope, you know, while looking at what our current situation is, you know, certain things may not change, but I believe as individuals, we can change. Collectively, if we reach out to one another, we can show that, you know, we can, you know, move beyond a lot of the negativity that we are suffering as Black gay men, Black gay women, transgender, and everyone in between. So I think that, you know, for me, you know, it took me a while to reconcile my sexuality. I lived complacent. You know, I didn't speak, I didn't go into certain situations and say that I was a gay male until, you know, I met someone who was strong in their identity. And I looked at them and I saw the power that they had, and it rubbed off on me. So my message of hope is to reach out to those who you see are strong in their identity and their faith and their willingness to be who they are. Reach out to them and learn from them, and don't be afraid to be who you are.
Thank you for this question. I had wanted to echo Chase, and then Guru took me someplace, and I'm at the place where I want to recognize David Eric. David Eric had his own business on Livernois, and he was my first boss. He was a Black gay man. So I went to school all the way downtown to Cass, took the bus after work to Livernois, but you know there's 2 buses that's hard to catch. And I worked for him up until closing. And he was an out Black gay man who had a wonderful, eclectic clientele of people buying goods for him. I didn't know until later the impact of working for David Eric meant to me, because as a man who did not look at me in any kind of sexual object, he provided a space for me to work and exist freely, which helped me in my coming out process. And so, though I only worked for him a year, in my head, he's still with me. He passed away. But David was hope. David was what I saw what gaydom looked like. He took me to my first gay party on Commonwealth when I saw fabulousness. And when I saw, now my daughter came out, so I knew myself, but I didn't know gay culture. And when I was asked to go to this party and say, oh, you may know this gentleman, Aaron Myers, the brother of Alicia Myers, I was invited to society. And they were fierce black folks in Ralph Lauren and Gucci and all of that. And I thought, ooh, I want to look like this, because this is fierce. They were hope. I saw what I was supposed to grow up and look like. I tell you that story because we are now what they are looking at. We are hope. We're hope. It isn't some kind of far-flung thought or, this aspirational thing where, I look to the heavens where God exists. It exists everywhere. But I look to God and, I hope to become, well, we're it. We're it. They're looking at us. I mean, you may not be as fierce as Aaron Myers was back in the day, because his sister had the #1 record of the land. But we are fierce in our own rights. And so, again, to the showing up piece, when you show up to somebody who's questioning themselves or asking what the future looks like, it's possibly you. And you know what that means. So just walk in power, knowing that all eyes are on you. You don't have to say much, you may not have to mentor, and don't do the whole, when I was young bullshit. Don't do that. Young people don't want to hear this shit. They don't want to hear this shit. All they want to do is see you in your fabulousness, to know what aspirational thinking is. You are hope.
So, going last on this question, I feel like I'm going to repeat people, but I'm going to try to put a twist on it. I think my message will be, name what you need and be unapologetic about it. Also name what you want to know. Like you said, with the questions that you have. And then my question would be, my demand for folks out here, similar to what you said, is that we have to show up for those folks. We have to talk to those folks. We have to be, whether it's mentors or just someone to say, hey, you want to go sit down for coffee so we can have a conversation, just to help folks on that path. And the last thing is that we got to meet folks where they are, right? We have to, some folks are at a place that coming out of the closet might not be the best thing for them, but they need a little bit of direction on some things or a little bit of information on that. So one thing, the message of hope will be name what you need, because you have a community around you that can help provide that for you. And also, we have to make sure that we show up and be active in their presence with folks.
I'm actually going to answer this one as well and close out my moderation portion. Hand it over to my Vanna White David Percy to walk around and get your questions. So I also am from Chicago, South Side, the poor side of town, poor neighborhood. I grew up working class, poor. And I say that to say, I am the co-founder of the first LGBTQ Youth of Color Drop-In Center in the state of Ohio that is now on its 13th or 14th year. I'm the co-founder of Black Alphabet, the first Black gay film festival in Chicago. I am now the co-founder of Brotherhood. I have run 2 businesses in my lifetime. As a poor Black gay kid who was kicked out at 16, and in the streets and on the streets. And so if I can do it, and I promise you I am not that exceptional, you can do it. You don't have to wait for anybody's permission. If you don't like what's happening socially in your world, culturally in your world, politically in your world, start it. I started BBB as a potluck in my house that met once a month. And now Cincinnati just opened their first chapter of BBB a year and 3 months later. say any of that to humble brag. I say that to remind people what hope can look like. And they look like this fat gay kid right here who just decided, oh, it's not here, let me go make it. And who else want to come along? And I got officers in the room who've helped make tonight happen, who helped make BBB happen. Got brothers in the room who helped make and so you go get your get along gang, and it don't take much because there ain't gonna be a whole lot of folks. And you just do it. You just do it. So Damon, we're gonna now open the floor to questions for our panel, and also if there's some from Facebook Live, we'll give you a mic. Chris, please keep your questions to under 2 minutes. We've distributed the index cards and pens to help you formulate your questions in advance for brevity. All right, go ahead.
My question is actually for the gentleman who's in the political arena. For every Omarosa that we see, that we heard about, that we know about, there's 5, 10, even 15 that we don't know, who works against what we as a Black community, we as Black people in politics, we as Black gay men who want a total different outlook is working against you. How do you battle people you don't know who side with someone like Mr. 45 until they're kicked out?
So, all skin folk and kinfolk. And I mean, we have to hold them accountable and call them out, right? In the way, like, definitely, and you call them out or call them in, whichever way you feel comfortable about, but we have to do that. And we see it in this city, and we see it across the country, right? That just because you're in that role, just because you're Black, you don't necessarily mean that you need to have that role. Because like you said, if you're working against me, if you're working against communities, if you're working against a marginalized community within the Black community, you need to get out of there. And we need to work to actually get somebody in those roles to actually do those things. So call them out and get them out there. That's what I was saying.
Yeah, so not only calling them out, but oftentimes they're in structures supported by Trumps of the world, right? So it's working to get out the people who have appointed them, who understand that the role that they're playing against us, right? So if that's a Donald Trump, if that's a Mayor Duggan, whoever that is, you work to get rid of them as well.
A lot of times lately we have been focusing on, those from our community who have went to validate the guy in the White House right now. But I think that a group of Black people we don't focus on enough in terms of keeping them in check and holding them accountable are Black so-called progressive intellectuals who kowtow to white liberalism. And so, I get so sick and tired. First of all, we don't have really any radical Black media outlets anymore. They're very hard to find. And so a lot of the Black media content that we get is paid for by white liberal entities. And I would venture to say that it's those Black people who are more dangerous to us, more of a danger to us than Black people who go work for white racist people. Because it's the white folks who know how to mask their racism, who Black people lift up and support, that do more damage to us. And so I think the way we combat that is through radically loving ourselves. Because if you radically love Black people, you won't be surprised or you won't be caught off guard when so-called Black liberals come out and defend white supremacy or defend white power structures. And so, I just think it's important to lay that out there, because I agree with you, the Omarosas of the world, they're the ones we laugh at, they're the ones we say, can take away their Black card, can they come to the barbecue? We make fun of it, right? And it's serious. But the real detriment, in my opinion, to Black people are the Black people who are in bed with white liberals.
Also, speaking to that, I heard the name James Cleveland earlier. I heard religious communities or the center of our community mentioned earlier. As Black gay people, we don't really have a Colin Kaepernick. We don't have anybody that's willing to put, or at least that I see in the forefront of the media, someone willing to put their agenda aside for the benefit of their authenticity. Our own Omarosas live in our Black churches. They are our choir directors. There are people that have made almost entire careers, for lack of a better term, out of putting their agenda before their authenticity, to the point that we have to call gay Black leaders dead people. So we'll say James Cleveland, we'll say Luther Vandross. While you were buying this person's record or supporting them, maybe the last thing they wanted to be called for the benefit of their agenda, a record company agenda, or what have you, was gay. Now that it's in a sense end and we've got polls, et cetera, we still see people at these heights up on the ceiling. Very, very much clearly we know what they do, they're in our churches, et cetera, but continue to put their agenda before authenticity, meaning they're not gonna be in this room. They don't really address gay organizations. They don't address HIV. They don't address things that happen in our communities that they are, at least after 5 o'clock at the Woodward, a part of. How do we build authenticity? How do we build an attraction to authenticity? How do we support our own Colin Kaepernicks? Are they willing to sacrifice or make the way for that person, willing to sacrifice their popularity and their agenda for the benefit of being authentically them? Sorry, I don't know.
Simply put, we have to inspire them and give them a reason to be authentic. I don't know if you've ever seen a clip on social media, but there was a question posed to Patti LaBelle. Someone asked, why wasn't Luther out? And I'm paraphrasing, she answered that he didn't feel it was important to come out. He didn't, he had to answer to other types of people, and he then made a decision. Now, for some of us, for some of a certain age, Luther Vandross was gay. I mean, we saw him on Sesame Street. We saw him with the Chic recording company. We've seen him before the Never Too Much LP. Were we strong enough in 80, 81 and 83 to say, hey, Luther, come out formally and we'll stand behind you? What institutions were around to do that? And so if we offer a hero or potential hero this incredible support, that I believe that they may think is attractive, they may be more inclined to do that. Now, there are Black people who have, fortunately, time has given some allowances for people to not be so risky. I know the, I forget his name, but the man who's in King Key Boots. Billy Porter. He's in Porter's, right? So, you know, he's a benefactor of the Luthers, James Clevelands, and others who made a decision not to. You know, he did. RuPaul is another great example. So, a great singer. We're talking about entertainers right now, right? We have to give them a reason. And if we look at the landscape, and Nguvu and Chase touched upon this, what institutions can they go that look like them, that can lift them up? And when things are good, we're all good, but when the curtain, I mean, when the shit hits the fan, are you still around? What institution will pick you up? We've seen people do that. And so if we strengthen institutions, when we strengthen institutions, we then have the ability for people to be more authentic and know that when you're coming for me, because that happens in that world, it's a very dog-eat-dog world, I got my people to still support my art, buy my records, come to the theaters, do all those things. And so I think though she's not a gay man, I think Patti LaBelle is a very good example of knowing that I can't sell records anymore, but I built capacity, I built capital, so that I can make a tour and still get the bills paid.
And I would say the way that we deal with those people is by supporting the people who are out. So you got people in this room who are running for office. Vote for them in November. You know what I'm saying? You got out gay black men running for public office in the city of Detroit. You need to be telling your mama and them to vote for this person. They don't need to know they're gay. Just tell them to vote for them if they vote. Because half the people who vote don't really know who they vote for anyways. So tell them, these are two people you need to vote for. I don't care who else you vote for these two. Support the people who are out, and then over time, there won't be any incentive to be in the closet because they'll already, like Curtis said, they'll know that there are people out there who will support them for who they are. You know what I'm saying? But we have to show them that it's possible. Because the reason why Luther didn't come out is because nobody had ever done that before him. Luther wasn't going to be the first. Well, we know that there were. But the vast majority of people who made it, who were gay, didn't come out. And Luther wasn't about to be the first. And so I think we live in a time where we have a larger number of people who are willing to be their authentic selves. And those are the people where we need to be lifting them up. Those are the people we need to be lifting them up.
I just want to make sure we're not erasing Sylvester or...
So yeah, Sylvester's a very important figure in our community, but that isn't the question at hand.
Right.
He did not have the financial success on his own talent in comparison to others who were lesbian and gay. And we know who those people are. So, hey, I'm a big Sylvester fan, I have all of his records, but what we're talking about.
No, yeah.
I just want to make sure it's a cost.
Right.
Well, coming out is different than taking risks at $1 million contracts.
Colin Kaepernick is not the best quarterback in the league. You know what I'm saying? Like, I get the comparison of you don't have to be the greatest star in the world, but I guess my point is it has to start somewhere. You know what I'm saying? Someone has to be willing to sacrifice that.
Significantly.
Absolutely.
Do we have any Facebook Live questions we want to?
Yeah. Oh, there you go. All right. Samuel Glass Jr. On the Facebook live stream asked, how does the panel feel about the body shaming and ostracism that consciously and unconsciously takes place regarding full-figured brothers? Not just in the gay community in general, but especially in the gay black male community.
Well, I'm going to speak because, thankfully, I'm a part of a community, but we don't really get into the whole body shaming thing. We really push people to come out and be body positive, as well as sex positive. It's all about being who you are, and we in the leather community really embrace anyone. I mean, people, I'm going to shout out my Full Throttle line. They had a pledge night back in the summer, and they all came out, jocks, whatever. And so we supported that, and that's what it's about. So it's unfortunate that does not spread more out within the community, but definitely within the leather community, we definitely push body positivity.
Well, I want to applaud Onyx. I mean, Onyx and other social groups that have embraced variations of our physical appearance in common spaces. I don't know, maybe Albert and others can remember a time when, no fashion, no femme was real in common spaces. And so, I've seen it change. So I just applaud those that work to make change.
No, it's all about Curtis. But no, I mean, also as a very married man, you might not have been able to see on the apps that some of us who are still single see quite a bit of the no fashion films thing. I'm just gonna encourage people to check out. I have an essay in the Counter Narrative Project's website that you can find called "Reflections of a Body Outsider." I mentioned it because in it I shout out all of the different Black Bear Brotherhood types of movements that are happening. It's not just us here in Detroit. We were inspired by the examples of Big Boy Pride and Hedonism and the Big Dogs. And there are social groups and mixers, and people are creating their own because we just got tired, right? Like we got tired of people ignoring our sexiness. And he's like, well, if y'all not gonna affirm my damn selves. And so we'll continue to do that. And one of the things that we also find is that as we create those spaces, all of those different types of brothers of different body shapes and sizes who may not have always felt comfortable saying, hey, I like a little girth, I like a little thing, I like a little curve, now have some places to go to get it. So, amen.
Amen. Oh, yeah. Marcus Redfern had a question. Is holding back the black dollar the only way to equality? Or is it educating the black culture more important? And how does that affect our subculture?
I'm the go-to person on this.
Yeah, is holding back the black dollar the only way to equality? Or is it?
So the Google will back me up, but it's not about holding back, right? Like that comes from the standpoint already that only this white supremacist structure is something that we invest into. No, it's not holding back. It's investing in ourselves, right? We have dollars that we can invest in our own communities, that we can build wealth, that we can buy spaces, that we create spaces, that we can donate to campaigns to put politicians in place that we want to see who represent us. It's not about holding back that dollar. It's about investing it in the right places. And that's not what we do. I know Google talks a lot about investing in black businesses. Michael talks about having a black chef who's preparing some wonderful food that I keep smelling in the back, right? Having a black media crew. Like I'm in the process of doing development right now. Developers black, architects black, contractors are black, tenants are black. It's the only way that you can actually make progress. So yeah, not about holding back. In the sense, perhaps, right, holding back to invest in us.
Could you say the second part of that question again?
Here we go. Or is educating the black culture more important? And how does that affect our subculture?
So Chase, so they're equal. They're not, one's not more important than the other. And Chase tackled that first half, so I'll tackle the second half of that question. Even when we don't realize that we're becoming conscious, every generation has been a little bit more conscious than the one before. And so, if you look back in our history as black people in this country, there was a time you could get your teeth knocked out if you called somebody black in this country. At first, we were chattel. Then we were slaves. Then we were niggers. Then we became Negroes when it was no longer acceptable to call somebody a nigger. And then we were colored. And then we were black and proud. And then we were African American. We've continuously elevated our consciousness even when we didn't realize we were doing it. I think the inevitable progression for us as descendants of African slaves is to refer to ourselves as Africans, because that's who we truly are as a people. That's my opinion. And if we continue to educate our people on that, embracing their African identity, I feel like that is probably one of the last, and not the last, steps of evolutionary growth in terms of our education of ourselves culturally. And what that does to our subcultures is, I personally believe that when we know who we are, we'll love who we are. And when you begin to love who you are, there are certain things that you just won't do because you love yourself. One of those things for me that I wouldn't do anymore is continue to carry a European last name. My birth name was Javante Porter. Some people in here who knew me as Javante back in the day. I took my African name because part of my reorientation in terms of understanding who I was culturally was understanding that how can I be free if I still carry the vestiges of the names of people who enslaved my ancestors. And so I legally took my African name in 2016. And so to this day, in ways that I never even imagined, the way I look at myself and the way that I think about myself has drastically changed because the way people interact with me has changed. People react very differently to a black man who sounds American, but his name is Nguvu, than they do to a black man who's American and his name is Javante. And Javante is my middle name now. I love my first name. But what I'm saying is, when you change your consciousness individually and when we change our consciousness collectively, our behaviors and our subcultures will inevitably change because the way that we look at ourselves has changed.
I want to add one more thing to that. As we think about like the Black dollar and things like that, I also think as we're moving towards a place of liberation and sovereignty, and Google said like that would take a revolution, right? After that revolution, money is not going to be how it is right now, and the way that we are getting things that we need is not going to look how it looks right now. So also a part of education is how are we growing the food that we need, right? Like how are we taking care of each other through health, right? How are we holding community to make sure that communities are safe without the structures that exist right now that are punitive? What are those things that involve self-determination, but also that involve that liberatory view of these, getting rid of oppressive views and oppressive systems, because I think we also have to think about that, because when the revolution comes, because it will come, how are we going to be ready for that, and how are we educating each other on what needs to happen and during it?
Thank you. One more question you can get us, and then okay, y'all don't make it real quick because we got they turning out lights on us.
That was a perfect segue into my question. So several of you mentioned that freedom will take bloodshed, and that you're going to surround yourselves with people and institutions that uplift all of you. With that said, and using the Haitian Revolution as the only instance of a successful slave revolt, no history. Given that it was centered around the African spiritual system of Odom, do you think that any efforts by us can be successful while still uplifting the oppressive spiritual traditions of our oppressors? For instance, Christianity is just as much a part of white supremacy as the private prison system. And don't we need to dismantle both systems on the path to liberation? Lastly, as Black SGO men, the African spiritual traditions of our ancestors were far more inclusive of all of us than any of the Abrahamic religions. So, yeah.
You said, well, you can't answer. You my best friend. Thank you. I'm gonna be honest with you. Spirituality has been one of the most contentious parts of my personal journey, because I was raised in the church. My mother put us in the church when I was about 8 years old. I was heavily involved in the church. And I left the church for some years. I started studying other religions. I looked to see if Islam was the right religion for me, but they damn sure wasn't taking a black gay man in Islam. Mr. Farrakhan was not the most welcome person either to same gender loving people at that time. He's grown a lot, but still ain't where we need him to be on that issue. Yes, Christianity is white supremacist. It is white supremacy. Especially if you are worshiping a white, blonde, blue-eyed Jesus, it's definitely white supremacy. I think we as African people are innately spiritual as a collective. And because our spiritualities were taken away from us and forced out of us, we've morphed these different religions to fit our unique Africanness. And so I don't believe the Bible word for word literally, but I still go to church because that feeling I get when I'm in church, that's African. That's that African spirituality. That has nothing to do with the text in that Bible. That has nothing to do with the words of that Quran. It has everything to do with that emotional connection that all of us are having together in that church. And so that's how I've been able to reconcile that. But Ma'at is, if y'all know what Ma'at is, it's an indigenous spirituality that derived from Kemet, which was ancient Egypt. That is my spiritual foundation. But because of the realities that we live in today, I think a lot of Black people still go to church for that experience, not necessarily because they believe the doctrine. I think that's changed a lot. And so, to answer your question, I wish that more Black people who practice indigenous spiritualities in this country would organize and create spaces for those of us who would love to be in those spaces. Because one of the reasons why I had to go back to the church is because there were no groups in the country that believed in my that I could link up with and have that support system. And so in order to get that spiritual feeling, you know, I go to the church, the right church for me to get that spiritual feeling from. But I can guarantee you, if there was an organized group of Odun people or people who practice Ma'at, I'd be there in a heartbeat.
Who got it? Just in the interest of time, I think we're going to have to go ahead and wrap up. If there's one more question, if you want to be quick, Damon, can you run over to that person? In the meantime, while they're doing that, I want to thank the Black Bear Brotherhood of Detroit. I'd like to thank, once again, our co-hosts, our host home affirmations, our co-sponsor, the Counter Narrative Project, and really quickly about the Counter Narrative Project, Charles Stevens don't like when we give him a whole lot of hosannas, but the reason you are here today is because somebody 4 years ago, Black gay men in Atlanta, Georgia, believed that we deserve a national organization that was for us, by us, about us, and he did the work in order to build it to an organization that was able to provide money to 5 cities to have events simultaneously today. So that's us creating our own, building our own, and circulating our own dollars. So I want to give it up to Charles Stevens of the Counter Narrative Project and his partner in crime, Johnny Cornegay. All of our generous volunteers, our caterer, our impromptu DJ, Ulysses Jones. Last but not least, I'd like to thank our panel, Chase and Google, Al, Denzel, Gino, Jay, Curtis, for helping to make tonight special. Remember to register to vote. Check your registration tonight. If you're already registered, take someone to the polls this November and clean up after yourselves on the way out the door, because the staff of Affirmations is ready to go home. Before I say thank you and good night, we're going to take this last question. Please make it a good one.
It's not a question, it's a statement. My brother and I come here tonight from Toledo, Ohio.
All right,
and it was one to support my brother, Michael Gibson, who I've worked with before, great person. I want to thank the entire panel up there for that wonderful information and wisdom you imparted upon us. About a year ago, I started a little organization called Eclipse. It's a LGBT organization to support us, people of color in Toledo. We hadn't done anything until this past August 8th and 9th, when we put on the first Black Pride in years there. In a 2-day period, we had over 500 people from the community come with work. So please know, everyone here, if you build it, they will come.
All right. Okay, thank you all. If you'd like to have more information about the Black Bear Brotherhood and sign up for our newsletter, you can visit us at blackbearbrotherhood.life. We'll be launching a brand new website soon, but you can go to our splash page and sign up for more information. We will have an event in February. We look forward to you joining us for it. Thank you all, and thank you everybody in this panel. Thank you, everybody. Please hashtag we will be heard. Good night.
I didn't. I told you. I think you probably.
I got a call. Y'all, but if y'all want to take a picture, if y'all want
Oh, yeah. Well, you know what? I'll be up on Facebook, Gino Harris. All right, thanks so much.
In the street.